to the third session. Third session will be handled by, chaired by Dr. Sangeeta Singh, Associate Professor, Head of the Department of English, NSCVM Government College, Hamripur, Himachal Pradesh, India. And the paper presenters in the session is Dr. Samshuddin MK, PDF Fellow, Institute of English, Kerala University, Merin Senla Jamur, Research Scholar, Department of History and Archaeology, Nagaland University, Kohima, Nagaland, India. Hemant M, PhD Research Scholar, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. And last one, Miss Garima Singh, Research Scholar, Department of English, Baba Mashnat University, Rohtak, Haryana. Over to you, ma'am, Dr. Sangeeta. Dr. Sangeeta.
Yes, good afternoon. I think
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, all of you. I don't know which session am I chairing. I'm chairing the third session, I believe.
Yes, ma'am, you're chairing the third session.
All right. The
Yeah.
third technical session, the names I have are different from what you have announced. Could you please repeat the names for me?
Yes, sure, ma'am. Dr. Samshuddin MK, PDF
Okay.
Fellow, Institute of English, Kerala University.
Right. Okay. Thank you so
Merin
much.
Senla Jamir.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah.
I hope I'm audible to all. A very good afternoon to all of you, all the participants in the audience here. Technical session of this international conference. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for considering me to chair this session. So the organization of such conferences is very relevant in the present times of knowledge sharing and gaining. So we look forward to the knowledge gains from all the research scholars who are going to present their papers today in this technical session. So we have 4 paper presenters in the order. The first one is Dr. Shanshuddin MK, and the second one is Merinisina Jamir, and the third one is Hemant M, and the fourth one is Ms. Garima Singh. So as you all would be knowing that each presenter would get approximately 10 minutes for presentation, and we can take up the observations and questions at the end of each paper, after each paper has been presented. So I would request all of you to keep your microphones on mute mode.
Excuse me, Sangeeta ma'am. Ma'am, just a minute. I just want to inform you that we.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Am I audible?
Already, it was framed from 12 to 1, and it's already 12:24. Hello, Sangeeta ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear
now
me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I just want the scholars. I just want the paper. Oh, yeah. I just want the paper presenters to present for 10 minutes and not more than that, because the time allocated for this session is 12 to 1, and already it's going to be 12:30, right? So
Right.
please, ma'am, you can just give an intimation that they can complete within 10 minutes.
I just told them. So as the organizer has herself informed that each presenter would get only precisely 10 minutes. Please don't exceed the time limit. Otherwise, I will have to intrude and stop you, and I would not like to do that at all. So without much ado, let me invite the first presenter. I hope the first presenter, Dr. Shamsuddin MK, is here. Um, Dr. Shamsuddin MK is a PhD fellow from the Institute of Kerala University, and his paper that he's going to present is Theatre in Quarantine, Experimentation and Trends of Zoom Theatres. So I invite the first speaker, Dr. Shamsuddin MK. I can't see the presenter, the first presenter. I believe the first presenter is not here. So we move on to the second presenter, Maricina Jamir. Maricinilla Jamir.
Hey, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello,
We
am I
have
audible?
her here. Yes, you're audible. Let me just give a brief introduction of Merin Jamir. She's a research scholar from the Department of History and Archaeology, Nagaland University, Kohima, Nagaland. And she is going to present her paper on position of Ao Naga woman in relation to customary law, a critical appraisal. So over to Merin Jamir.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me share my PPT. Is it visible to all? Hello?
Yes, yeah, your PPT is visible,
Okay.
but I think you can make it full screen if you can. Oh.
Okay.
Now your PPT is not visible.
It's not, just hold on. Um, how about now? Is it visible? Is this fine, ma'am?
Yes, it is visible. You can start.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. The title of my presentation is Position of Ao Naga Women in Relation to Customary Law, a Critical Appraisal. So before I go into it, I want to give a small introduction. So Nagas are a small tribal community from the northeastern part of India. We are made up of 16 major tribes, but today we will be looking into one of the Naga tribe, that is the Ao Nagas, and specifically the Ao Naga women in relation to customary law. Nagas have no written history, and so we rely on oral traditions in the form of songs and folklores for the construction of our history. So, the story of origin for the Ao Nagas is such that three major clans, that is the Pongoner clan, the Longomer clan, and the Jamir clan, they originated from six stones, three males and three females, and from there they procreated to form the Ao Naga tribe. And there are many institutions that are important for the Ao Nagas, but the Morung and the Tsiki, Morung for the male and Tsiki for the girls. So there are dormitories where when they reach the age of puberty, they enroll themselves here and they are taught to be man and woman. And these institutions are very important for the social identity of an Ao Naga. So now when we look to authority,
Afraid you're
there
not
is this
audible.
Okay, can you hear me, ma'am?
Continue. Yeah,
Hello.
continue.
Okay.
In between, we lost you for a few seconds.
Okay. So when we look to authority, there is this Putumandan. So what is this Putumandan? It is the apex decision-making body in every Ao Naga village. And so moving on, Nagas are historically known to be headhunters, skilled, self-sufficient, and community-oriented. The Naga society is based protection. In feminist anthropology, we see that hunting tribes exhibit more patriarchal tendencies as among the Naga society. And when we look to protection in the Ao Naga society, it meant protection of one's territory, women, and children from invaders, raiders, wild animals, and every kind of danger. This is where we find embedded the notion of strength, power, and honor. Protection also points to survival, that the community that one protects sustains growth, procreation, and settlement. So, this cycle of protection, clad with power and control, it keeps getting passed on to generation after generation, though it adapts different forms of protection over and protection of without losing its main essence of power and control. So we see that in the Ao Naga community, there existed only one form of authority, that was the Puttamintan. But with the coming of the British and the Christian missionaries, they had to respond to three sets of authority. That is the Puttamintan, the missionaries, and the British. Now, with the Ao Nagas getting converted, the missionaries discouraged many new converts from being a part of many social events and many social setups of the village, and one of them was the morung. And to bypass the morung life meant that one had to give up a lot of power, a lot of control, and also identity in the village. So the missionaries realized that if they do not fix it quickly, the new converts would go back to their old pagan practices. So they now started transferring the power that they enjoyed in the morung from the public domain to the private domain. So what we see is by now they started invading the homes of the converts, and by teaching women to be submissive to their husbands, the missionaries had already submerged the identity of women to that of man, maintaining the idea of man pride which men enjoyed in the morung before conversion. It was reinstated through manipulating the minds of the Naga women to become mere seconds to their husbands as they now invaded the homes of the converts. And now the British also had a form of legitimacy and control over the Ao Naga population. Now they created this essence of personal over communal. The Nagas had always lived a communal life, but now everything communal was being changed to personal, and then they placed a price over everything personal now. Now with this shift in authority, we see that there was also a shift in the way that things happened. This shift, it meant that the way honor and power was maintained was shifted. This shift, it created an unseen but felt structure that connected land ownership, power, and patriarchy. Shifting notion of protection over and protection of, resulting in women from being the protected to the excluded. Now what happened is women were protected to, in the past women were protected to preserve identity, but now women were excluded to preserve identity. This made a shift in the social and political milieu of the Ao Naga community. So what we see uh, today, the patriarchy enforced today is this. The Ao Naga society, with its innate patriarchal wiring of protection and honor and power, together with the colonial administration and missionaries' concept of patriarchy, based on honor, power, and control by subdue and submission, gave way to the patriarchy that is enforced today. So, Tachin Au, when he talks about the status of woman, he says that a daughter is a subordinate member of the family, and she is not given any uh, ancestral property, because if she gets married to another man who is not an Au or from a non-Naga community, such immovable property would become the property of another person, and this stands the chance of the Aus becoming a minority. And now Limatullah Longkamer, she says that when we try to understand the patriarchy that is in place today, the customary law that is in place today, we need to understand the dualistic ideologies that forms patriarchy in the Ao Naga society. That is um, male, female, superior, inferior, good, bad, higher, lower, stronger, and weaker. Toli Achumi states that since the Ao Nagas had always valued head hunting, and there was big honor and prestige in bringing the head of an enemy back to the village, since it was always head hunting was always a man's occupation, and women were not able to participate in it because of one's physical structure, because of child rearing, because of agriculture and other work. Women were left out of this prestige. And in the process, with time, women started to be left out of decision making process and becoming members in important bodies of the village. Now, when we look at the status of the Ao Naga women, we see that no immovable property, be it land or be it movable property made of metal, they were not given as inheritance to women. They had no place in the Putumandan. And in the olden days, even if the woman was the oldest in the village, she had no right to become the priest, that is the Putir. And women were accused of practicing witchcraft. And if a family was poor, the family being poor was blamed on the lazy wife or the lazy mother. And women were not allowed certain portions of meat for consumption because it believed that it causes complications in childbirth. A husband was allowed to divorce his wife if she could not bear him an heir. And ironically, when that man would go marry another wife, the second or the third time, it was seen that he would not be able to give himself a heir. And he would divorce the wife, first wife, saying that she was at fault while he was the one at fault. And even in that, women carried negative qualities. For instance, the female spirit was considered more evil compared to its male counterpart. And these are certain words that are used to describe people in the society, and these qualities are described using a woman. For example, amit Zertapang, it means a foul mouthed widow. So when person, be it a man or a woman, runs their mouth without knowing what is good or bad, this tag would tag them amit Zertapang. And then the next one is Titsir Ama. That's this used to describe a man that's not manly in the traditional sense. And Titsir Tanur is uh, literal translation means women and children, but it is used for instances where um, woman's opinion or a woman's presence is not needed, and uh, they would use this word to say that it is not your place to be here. So, use of these words, it indicates the female gender is groomed to fit into the silhouette of the male gender construct right from home. And we see that women are also made to embody honor. This imbibed notion of protection and honor in the Naga society, uh, being flexible with time, changed with who and what was protected, but this notion of honor on placed on women did not change. Protection of one's lineage only points to protection of identity, and for the Nagas, the solution lies in protecting the land that it inhabits from outsiders. Since the Ao Nagas they trace their lineage through their male progeny, so to give away ancestral land to the daughter or wife meant it posed chances of being possessed um, by another. And it also meant that not giving away land to the woman meant that one had to ensure that one's lineage was looked after well. And one reason this becomes a gendered notion is that um, this notion of land being very important to the Naga society, this notion of Nagas being territorial comes into play. And this honor, it becomes a gendered notion, and one way to hold on onto it is by instituting structures like customary law that controls and regulates the power of and the rights of the woman. And now, when we look at custom, we understand that custom it is an unwritten law that is established by usage and that has been transcended from time immemorial. And with the usage of this custom, it becomes the law that governs the society. And since this customary law is regulated and justice is given by the Putumundan, that is placed in every our village. Now the question arises, is it relevant for the present day and age? So an example is seen in the Akuya village. That's a village in the Mokokchung district where people would approach the Puttamandan for with problems. But if they are not satisfied with the decision that is given by the Puttamandan gives them time to go approach the court and come back with a slip that says that they have taken the problem to the court and it's no longer the problem of the Puttamandan. So there is a flexibility in how the institutions approach, and so the relevance would fit into the flexibility that is being adopted. And now the question also arises, is codification of customary laws required? And this opinion is given by Justice D.M. Sen, who is against this idea of codifying the Naga customary law. And he says that the moment you codify it, you make it final and firm and rigid. The Naga society, the tribal societies are developing much faster than any other societies, and you yourself do not know what you are going to retain and what you are not. So, codification means binding yourself. Since the customary laws are flexible to certain extent, I believe codification is not the answer. And now, looking at the present status of the Naga women, positive changes are coming about. As in, if the father leaves a will for the daughter, saying that the land that he has purchased is a gift for the daughter. Such norms are followed, and then we see women participation in election, even though many are not elected, and educational institutions adopting gender studies like women study centers in the Nagaland University since 2007. And there are also different departments coming up, say the Mikey, that is under the Women Resource Development. It is a transformative livelihood innovation that tries to promote livelihood among women and financial inclusion for them. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, Marine Jamer, that was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
And the verbal presentation that you made. We could just see your enjoy. Nevertheless, you talked about the patriarchal control of affect the ratio. And further in your paper, you talked about how the British authority and the missionaries changed this, the folk traditions of the Ionara tribe, and how the authorities kind of changed, and how their interference with the power structures further, by the manipulation of the Naga women tribe, how, you talked about all those things. And there was a shift in authority and further, you can say, fossilization or the strengthening of the patriarchal system that took place. So the innate patriarchy was not so discriminative as it was initially, and how you took all of us through the transformation that took place in these customary laws gradually. And you also talked about the head hunting as the main occupation of the tribe that you talked about, and how women were left out of that privilege, and they were not given that prestige because of their inability to indulge in such an activity. And you also talked about you briefly talked about the witchcraft which women were associated with, and the discrimination of women that is there, and how the gender roles are, compartmentalized, and you have certain norms for women, and but never, in spite of all that, they were never hierarchical in your initial folk tradition. But how this hierarchy and discrimination set in with the interference of the missionaries and the British, shows how the tribal folk tradition is being corrupted, I would say, or being transformed due to the influence of others, of the outsiders, if I may say so. And I appreciate your bringing in the flexibility that has come in your customary laws by the introduction of the court having to make decisions which the people do not agree with. And I also liked how you have talked about, your being against the codification. You quoted some judgment there where you oppose the codification, otherwise it would kind of become a binding for everyone, and there will be no further changes. And the customary laws are than these, the court laws, which are more, so to say. So that was an interesting thing, that interesting point of view, that paper. And the present new norms that you talked about, the increased participation of women in politics, education, research, and how they're being promoted for financial independence. It shows a path, future ahead for the Ayonaga women and the tribe that you talked about. And it was a wonderful paper which ended on a very positive note. And I congratulate you, Marine Jamir, for your wonderful presentation. And we are very grateful that you brought such information about from such distant land here to all of us. It was a pleasure listening to your customary laws and how things were there. We have no idea about the Ayonaga women and how the customary laws work there and the relation of the power girds that exist there. So I congratulate you and I thank you for bringing in your research findings and your research gains to all of us. Many congratulations to you. So thank you so much. I would request if you would if anybody wants to say anything, any observations or any questions, briefly, very briefly. So I think, Mirin, I would thank you, Mirin Jamir, I would thank you for that. So I would now invite the next presenter, Mirin Sela Jamir. I hope she's here. She or he, I don't know, Mirin Sela Jamir. Acha, she was the one who presented. Yeah. Is Dr. Shamanusuddin MK here? He was the first speaker. I don't see his name here. So I would invite Hemant M. Hemant M.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon.
Am I audible?
Yeah, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're very much audible, Hemant M. May I just briefly introduce you before I hand over the platform to you? Hemant M is a PhD research scholar from Banaras Hindu University from Varanasi. And he is going to present a paper on memory and trauma of displacement, a study of Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots. So over to you, Hemant.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. The title of my paper is Memory and Trauma of Displacement, a study of Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots. After the development of contemporary trauma theory in USA during the early 1990s, the critical question of representing trauma in literature has received widespread attention. The present study attempts to explore how personal and collective trauma is represented in a moving memoir on Kashmiri Pandit exodus, whose post-migration from Kashmir Valley in the early 1990s is an everlasting wound in the history of humanity. Based on Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots, this paper endeavors to analyze how trauma is represented not only through temporal and spatial descriptions but also through characters and settings in the text. Moreover, the proposed study seeks to understand the ways in which various forms of memory have been employed to improve the testimonial quality of the narrative. Kashmiri Pandits have become refugees in their own country after their mass exodus from Kashmir Valley in the early 1990s. For Pandits, displacement and their subsequent life in exile had created uncertainty at social, cultural, and psychological dimensions of their life. Most of them did not return to their valley for resettlement due to various unfavorable socio-political circumstances, thereby leading a life of permanent exile. In On Uncertain Ground, Displaced Kashmiri Pandits in Jammu and Kashmir, Ankur Datta describes the inability of Pandits to emotionally adjust with the loss even after 2 decades of their displacement. The issue of place and resettlement and the loss of material possessions, assets, and livelihood, along with the loss of socio-economic and political status and self-respect, figures in any discussion with the Pandits. What complicates the scene is the fact that more than 2 decades have passed since their displacement. Many Kashmiri Pandits have rebuilt their lives with varying degrees of success. Yet the sense of loss with displacement persists across generations. There is an inability to make a secure place and home in spite of settlement in a physical sense. Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots is a powerful and moving memoir that narrates the tragic story of mass exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from their homeland and their life after exodus. Pandita was in his adolescent years when his family was forced to leave their ancestral home in Kashmir Valley. In his memoir, he has written a deeply personal story of homelessness, both physical and mental. This paper closely analyzes this text as a deeply personal trauma narrative through the method of detailed textual analysis. The author has explored the tool of memory to unfold trauma in the lives of displaced Kashmiri Pandits, both at personal and collective levels. The author, who himself is a victim of forced displacement, reports all the sequences of experience associated with exodus in such a way that this narrative becomes a therapy to overcome the effects of physical and mental trauma. As Susan Martin rightly says in this regard, I quote, forced migration often involves trauma, dislocation, and abrupt change in life. At a minimum, the displaced may face emotional problems and difficulties in adjustment resulting from loss of family and community support. More serious mental health problems may arise from torture and sexual abuse prior to or after flight. Though Indian state has officially categorized the displaced Kashmiri Pandits as migrants, they can be sociologically described as IDPs, that is, internally displaced persons. Robert Cohen and Francis M. Deng in Masses in Flight, the global crisis of internal displacement associates the predicament of internally displaced with that of refugees crossing international borders. According to them, they are refugees in their own nation with their basic civil rights and human rights are consistently violated. Moreover, displacement is not merely a geographical dislocation, but a complete breakdown of social, cultural, religious, and emotional bondage shared at a community level. It is near to impossibility for a displaced person to mentally integrate with his new surroundings even after many decades of migration. Their memories of past haunt them in such a way that the strong feeling of alienation becomes an everyday reality. Mostly, they suffer from mental health conditions such as post traumatic stress disorder, which is a direct outcome of terrifying traumatic events that they witnessed during the exodus. Its symptoms include recurring memories and dreams about traumatic incidents during the exodus, involuntarily re experiencing such events as if it is happening in the present through flashback mode of memory, recurring disturbing nightmares about such events, etc. Memory in literature is the formal written expression of significant past embedded in the human psyche. It hails from the process of thought shaped by the experience of historical past. As every sensation in life is molded by thought and memories, every literary text is the product of human perception, which are formed in thoughts and shaped in memories. Memory functions at multiple levels of a literary text, especially in the modern world of individual and collective identity. It acts as a means to represent the past with authenticity, as it is in testimonies where literature concurs with history to reveal what is systematically concealed from the public domain by the official historiography. Moreover, it functions as a way to reconstruct both individual and collective cultural identity, which had been lost in the flow of time. A monumental work of literature that contributed to the evolution of memory is Marcel Proust's autobiographical novel Remembrance of Things Past. This early 20th century work had employed memory as an effective tool of narration, which begins with the famous Madeline episode in the first volume of the novel, where the narrator is rapidly immersed into memories of his childhood through tasting a Madeline, a small cake, along with a tea. Evoked by the unique taste of the cake, the narrator journeys to his own mental landscape where sequence of events from the past unfolds in the form of a story. This book has tremendously impacted the use of memory in the process of narration in order to establish textual authenticity for the exploration of the self and the world. The modern writers have also closely followed Proust's techniques of narration in the process of constructing memory oriented narratives. Rahul Pandita also begins his memoir with the memory of an old man's death in the refugee camp in Jammu 1990. I quote, "They found the old man dead in his own tent with a pack of chilled milk pressed against his right cheek. It was our first June in exile, and the heat felt like a blow in the back of the head." I unquote. Through beginning his narration with the memory of an old man's corpse in a refugee camp, the author sets the tone of the entire narrative, which is undoubtedly of desolation, despair, and hopelessness. As he puts it, I quote, "At 14, we knew we were refugees, but we had no idea what family meant. And I don't think we realized then that we would never have a home again." I unquote. Pandita was just 14 when he was forced to be a refugee in his own country. However, the memories were so intense and intrusive in such a way that it traumatizes his future psyche with more intensity than at the moment in which he witnessed it as an adolescent. Unlike the voluntary migration of a group from one geographical region to the other, the forced displacement of Pandit community from their homeland was basically inhuman and unfair, especially in the modern world of liberal democracy. Their displacement was both geographical and psychological. Their displacement become a state of permanent exile when they cannot return to their homeland, mostly due to social, political, and communal circumstances. Pandita recognizes their state of exile when he observes. I quote, "Like most migrants, I had also come to Delhi in search of a better life, to regain some of what my family had lost during the exodus from the Kashmir Valley. But there was a difference between the other migrants and me. On festivals and on family functions, or when they were dying, they knew they could go back to where they had come from. I could not do that. I knew I was in permanent exile. I could own a house in the city or any other part of the world, but not in the Kashmir Valley where my family came from." I unquote. The memoir has an authentic testimonial quality where the narrator encapsulates both personal and collective memory, narrating the individual memory of various characters, including the narrator himself. Pandita recreates a dark episode in the history of humanity. Through both voluntary and involuntary memory, these characters get a cognitive map through which they comprehend who they are, why they are here, and where they are up to. These individual memories of events achieves a collective spirit so that the voice of the voiceless get due recognition. This unique function of memory is clearly evident in the narrative pattern of the work. For instance, the critical questions on home, homelessness, trauma, and loss of identity have been suggested effectively by the narrator when he discusses the home story of Ma. The home story, I quote, "The home story was a statement that Ma had got into the habit of telling anyone who would listen. It didn't matter to her whether they cared or not. It had become a part of herself, entrenched like a precious stone in a mosaic of her identity. By the time her voice had failed in 2004, I noticed that she had started repeating this statement much too often. It was the only thing that reminded her of who she was, more than the occasional glances she would steal at the mirror when no one else was looking. Our home in Kashmir had 22 rooms. The text directly suggests the impact of post traumatic stress disorder among the victims of Exodus, including the narrator. For instance, the PTSD, the post traumatic stress disorder like symptoms, are evident when the narrator records his physical and psychological responses to slogans seeking the freedom of Kashmir. I quote, "The noise beats hard on my chest, like a drumbeat gone berserk. My head feels like an inferno, and a cold sweat travels down my back." I unquote. Through writing out the trauma, the narrator himself is undergoing a therapeutic treatment of mental recuperation. As Anne Kaplan explains in her Trauma Culture, the politics of terror and laws in media and literature, the authors find varying strategies through which to communicate what the traumatic events meant to them emotionally. More than an intense emotional response, the narrator's response is hysterical as he dissociates himself from reality. Rahul Pandita diligently records his own psychological responses as an adolescent boy on this crucial day on January 19, 1990, a day in which Kashmiri Pandit exodus began. As he narrates, I'm in a deep slump. I can hear strange noises. Fear grips me. All is not well. Everything is going to change. I see shadows of men slithering along our compound wall, and when they jump inside one by one, so many of them. I unquote. Pandita compares their tragedy with that of Jews in Nazi Germany during World War II through mentioning Auschwitz, the distressing symbol of Jewish genocide. The atmosphere of bloodshed and the fear associated with exodus had tortured them emotionally, thereby leading to an extreme condition of psychological trauma. The narrator provides a comprehensive view of the plight of women as well as, and their victimization to sexual and emotional abuse as well. The narrator provides a poignant image of Pandit women in Exodus through the following lines. I quote, women had herded like cattle into the back of trucks. In one of the trucks, a woman lifted a tarpaulin sheet covering the back and peered outside. There was nothing peculiar about her except the blankness in her eyes. They were like a void that sucked you in. Years later, I saw a picture of Jewish prisoner in Auschwitz. When I saw his eyes, my mind was immediately transported to that day, and I was reminded of the look in that woman's eye. Trauma memories are intrusively involuntary, where an individual re experiences suppressed images of violence and bloodshed as it happens in the present moment. If it is experienced as involuntary memories and flashbacks during the daytime, it is re experienced as haunting nightmares at night. These haunting memories exist as a continuum through recurring re experience even after knowing that it happened in the past. At times, traumatic memory functions in a fragmented manner where the victim is powerless to verbally recount all the experiences in the form of a narrative. But such memories are startlingly vivid but fragmented in the psyche of the victim. Moreover, such big memories have a revolutionary role in remembering what is forgotten. As the narrator puts it, I quote, I spoke to him about how I understood why he did not want to talk about it, but how important it was to talk about it. I quoted Milan Kundera, the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. I unquote. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hemant, for your presentation of memory and trauma of displacement in Rahul Pandita's Our Moon Has Blood Clots. So, your paper was about the personal and the community trauma that the Kashmiri Pandits had to undergo during the time when they were exiled from their own homeland, in their own country. They had to become refugees in their live like refugees in their own country. Well, you also talked about the kind of emotional adjustment that they had to undergo, the social economic loss, which has been presented in the novel by Rahul Pandita. And the it also brings out the complicated network of the trauma at various levels, at various layers that they had to undergo, and I believe they still are undergoing. And this memoir is it brings out the personal and the collective trauma of the entire Kashmiri Pandit community, um, and it is a rather painful presentation, and it sort of rages us when we read about these Kashmiri Pandits. It annoys us at the same time, and we feel sympathetic towards these Kashmiri Pandits, and we feel their pain, their the post-traumatic syndromes that they still have to undergo, the fragmented memories of the painful experiences that they had to undergo. And your paper was well presented, and also you talked about memory as an effective tool of narration in such kind of memoirs. And you brought in a lot of theorists like Marcel Proust, who have talked about memory as being a wonderful tool of narration, and how Rahul Pandit has also used this tool. And I would like you to throw some light on the recent, the recent, I would say, the controversial movie that that has been talked about on the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits. I would like you to, say something about that movie in context with this novel.
Yeah, I have watched that movie, and more than you can critically analyze that movie, and sometimes you can call that movie as some sort of a propagandist movie. But these text, these memoirs, these are by the personal experiences, and these are not written or produced by someone from outside. These are the first hand experiences, and these are the first person narrations of people who have witnessed this mass exodus, and they are having more authenticity than the movie of Kashmiri Pandits, which has recently been released. And I think more than the politics behind such movies, and more than the political issues related to that, the real issue is the problem that the Kashmiri Pandit community has suffered and is still suffering. And it is all about the trauma that the community is suffering. It has nothing to do with any particular propaganda or any particular political agenda. It is more about a community which has been displaced, and the trauma and the psychological issues that the community is suffering for many decades, and they are not able to overcome that sort of traumatic event even after 3 decades. So, in the world of liberal democracy, we should see this sort of narratives as some sort of some sort of literary revolution, or some sort of a revolt against the existing system and the existing notions of understanding things. And through these narratives, we are getting a very clear understanding of their psychology and the pain and the trauma that they have undergone, and they are still suffering. And these narratives are having more authenticity and more historical validity. In fact, these narratives can be considered as some sort of testimonies with some sort of historic authenticity, when official historiographers have failed to recognize that historical significance, or they have failed to represent their trauma, or failed to represent the real reality of Kashmir. But these narratives are providing a very more authentic historic view about exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits than films and other productions. In fact, I have watched the movie, and that movie was close to reality. Was close to reality, but since movies are having some agendas, having some propagandas, all were behind that. But still, but these texts, if you are going through these texts, you can understand that the scenes that we have seen in the movie were not so much exaggerated, those were close to reality. And the trauma that Pandits went through during that time was close to what we are seeing in the movie.
Yes, obviously you're right. Movies do have to show things in a glorified way, or they have certain agenda or something to promote. Whereas these memoirs, they are more about the personal experience, the kind of personal documentaries which we can rely on, because they're coming from the first-hand experience. Though cannot be included in history, hagiography maybe, yes. Wonderful presentation, and good research work you've done there, Hemant. I congratulate you on your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Anybody has anything to say regarding the paper that we just heard? I guess that's it. Hemant, thank you for your wonderful presentation. We have here the fourth speaker, Garima. I hope Miss Garima is. Hello. Just. Garima is here. The fourth speaker, Ms. Garima.
Ma'am, excuse, she's not there, I suppose.
All right. So I guess we've covered everyone except Dr. Samshuddin MK. He
Yes,
was also
ma'am.
not there
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
earlier.
ma'am. Yeah.
So I guess we just had two speakers here for this session, and
Yeah.
it was indeed very interesting to hear about two, different communities, one from the Ayo Nagas and one the Kashmiri Pandits, and the pain and the trauma of the Kashmiri Pandits is really heartfelt by all of us. And of course, the Ayo Naga tribe, something about which not many people are aware of, and their the customary laws that Marine Jamir brought forth through her presentation was quite enlightening, and we gained a lot from her presentation, and we wish both the research scholars the very best for their future ventures and their research work. I thank you all for being such patient listeners. Thank you so much. I guess that will be all for this session. I hand over the platform to the organizer. Thank you for having me.